Okay, we're going to start our meeting. First, thank you for all coming out. It's not the greatest weather out there, but thanks for coming out in the storm anyway. Hopefully it won't get bad until late at night, if at all. So I'm Bob Carlson. I'm the first selectman. We also have Selectwoman Nicole Porter and Selectman Brett Mastriani. And as always, we start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, is there any public comment on non-agenda items? That's things that we're not going to cover tonight. So on non-agenda items, any public comment? Okay, seeing none. We have minutes from December 6th and December 12th. Do you want a motion? I'm going to motion that we accept the minutes from, was it Board of Selectmen special meeting on December 6, 2023 at 6:30 p.m. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, I'll motion that we accept minutes from December 12, 2023. It was a Board of Selectmen regular meeting, 6:30, submitted by Jen Knight. Do I hear a second? Okay, second by Brett Mastriani. Any discussion? None. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any comments by either of the selectmen? No comments? And to keep the meeting shorter tonight, I have no comments either. So let's move on to number 7, Wheeler Library Building Renovation Presentation.
Okay. All right. Hello. Again, on behalf of Wheeler Library, I want to thank you for your time and your support. My name is John Edwards. I'm a board member of Wheeler Library as well as a business owner in town. We're here to ask the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance to approve a town-wide referendum to help finance the renovation and restoration plans for the Wheeler Library. During the presentation, we will touch on the history of the building, our renovation and restoration goals, and chronicle why we must renovate the building now. We will review the funds that are needed for the project, discuss the budget, and the funding. Our Treasure Town Library building is over 110 years old. Over the last century, this building has been well cared for, with necessary maintenance being a priority. With town assistance, the building has had upgrades and repairs over the many decades. Wheeler Library was last renovated in 1990, over 30 years ago. At that time, the town of North Stonington financially supported the project with a $370,000 referendum, which was bonded over 4 years, while the Connecticut State Library granted the library $330,940. Wheeler Library is not a municipal agency, and therefore the town is relieved of bearing the full costs of operating the library. The endowment, annual appeal, and grants still cover the majority of the expenses of daily operations. Our association library has been and will always be a great asset to our community that is not a heavy burden on our town's budget. We take great pride in being an independent entity that is well-maintained, well-staffed, and an invaluable asset to the town. How are we an asset? Well, Wheeler Library measures its value to our town by its educational, cultural, and social contributions to community life. This higher standard is reflected in our property values. We have a town with an excellent school system and a vibrant, busy library that acts as the town's community center, and these characteristics contribute greatly to our sense of town pride. We know that real estate agents take prospective buyers to see the library as well as other key assets in our town when showing homes. We must take care of our asset and understand that a well-functioning library is an investment in our town. Yes, you certainly may. Okay. We will hold. Today, our magnificent building needs repair and improvements. The Board of Trustees, Wheeler Library staff, and a committee of townspeople have spent the last 2 years researching and developing a plan of action that is forward-thinking and includes our entire community. We conducted field studies at other libraries to understand how libraries are serving their communities in ways we can emulate. We have engaged volunteers from many sectors of our town to work on committees to explore and identify what needs to be done. We have engaged with experts to determine the best course of action to bring the building into the 21st century and set the building up to serve the public in the best way possible while using less energy and running more efficiently. Over the course of our 2 years of research and planning, we have identified 4 key areas: heating and cooling, correcting drainage issues, activating our outdoor space, improvements to the interior spaces. Included in this project is adding meeting spaces to the first and second floor, adding a bathroom on the second floor, and improving the front entrance to include handicap accessibility. The plans include spaces and activities for our teen population, which is the one age group that currently underutilizes the library. One of our important core missions is to maintain the historic nature of the building and, where possible, improve the building to restore it to its original architecture. Importantly, we want to assure everyone we are not changing the library. There are no additions planned. Instead, we are using our existing spaces to create more flexibility within the library while honoring the historic features of the building. As the first step in funding our project, we embarked on applying for a $1 million grant from the Connecticut State Library. This was a complex application process that required putting out an RFQ for an architect, hiring an architect, submitting architectural renderings, establishing a fundraising plan, as well as submitting a case for our plans. We were awarded the $1 million grant in 2021 and are required to match the $1 million to have the monies reimbursed. Receiving this grant is validation from the state of Connecticut that we have real needs, and this project is worth a significant investment. Working with our architect, HMA2, we developed a cost estimate for our project in November of 2022. This estimate is the framework for our fundraising goals. The largest piece of the project by far is completely overhauling the heating and cooling system and bringing climate control to all floors. In our current state, the existing heating and cooling system is a retrofit into a 1900 structure and only provides central air conditioning to the first floor. The renovation and overhaul would provide new all-electric heat pump systems, taking the building off oil. The electric heat pump system will consist of outdoor condensing units and indoor vertical floor-mounted units beneath the windows. A new dedicated outdoor air system consisting of an indoor energy recovery ventilator unit will provide ventilation air to all floors. Fresh air will be brought in from the roof level, potentially from repurposing the building's chimney. The 30-year-old oil-fired cast iron burner will be replaced by a modern, high-efficiency, clean heat pump system. The cooling system is a variable refrigerant flow system consisting of two 12-ton outdoor heat pump condensing units connected via a refrigerant piping distribution system to indoor fan coil units located in each of the spaces throughout the facility. The ventilation air will be provided by a dedicated outdoor air system that draws in fresh outdoor air and exhausts an equal amount of exhaust air while reclaiming its waste heat. To install this new state-of-the-art system that will be entirely hidden from view and not impact the historic look of our building, the drop ceiling from the first floor will be removed. Currently, the existing heating, cooling, plumbing, and electrical is hidden under the drop ceiling on the first floor. This myriad of pipework, ductwork, and electrical wiring will be removed, replaced, and rerouted into two shafts on the first floor that are incorporated into the renovation design. By removing the drop ceiling, we reveal a top row of windows that have been hidden for decades. This will not only restore the first floor back to its original architecture, but will also bring more natural light into the space. It is critically important at this time to address our heating and cooling system as well as the air circulation. The upper floor from June through early September is often unbearable, even with the fans at top speed, making this level all but unusable. We need to air condition this floor. The lower basement level is beneath ground. It suffers from mildew and a lack of air circulation. This level is critical space and will continue to be. As the library gets busier with children's programs and teen events, we need to solve the moisture and air quality issues that plague this floor. The boiler is 30 years old. We are on borrowed time with this system. As a board, we have done the responsible thing in designing a system overhaul that will be energy efficient, free us from oil, and create a healthier building where every floor is usable, no matter what the time of year. We are putting in a system that will be serving the building for the next several decades. The library sits on a high water table and experiences water and flooding in the basement often, including 3 feet of water in the basement in 2010. Ice develops throughout the rear parking area in the winter. The current drainage system is failing. In particular, the slab drains at the bottom of the east and west exterior basement stairwells, as well as the building's gutter system. Our staff is challenged with mopping up water and managing the expensive and time-consuming process of drying out the lower level at least once a year. Our plan includes drainage of stormwater off the building with a new gutter system where needed, re-engineered parking areas, and creating a proper drainage system beneath the surface, including a deep infiltration 20-foot trench area to address stormwater. We have an opportunity to enhance and improve our public spaces outdoors. In tandem with addressing the drainage, we plan to work with a landscape architect to create a park-like space on the west side of the property. At the front of the building, we are proposing a very simple pergola that can be used in a variety of ways, including as a stage for graduation and community events. The pergola is also a structural device that allows us to create a handicap-accessible low-grade ramp that will give easy access to the front entrance for anyone in a wheelchair or with a stroller or just needing assistance. Providing physical access to the library is basic to making services available to everyone. The current entrance for strollers, wheelchairs, and those who need assistance is in the rear of the library with access to our aging elevator. It is a narrow entrance with a sharp turning radius. Our renovation provides for a ramp along the front, in keeping with the architecture of the building, and providing easy access for the many families with young children, people with mobility issues, with a well-lit entrance for all. Inside the building, the renovation includes creating 2 meeting rooms, 1 large meeting room on the first floor and 1 small meeting room on the second floor. We will also bring a bathroom to the second floor. As mentioned, one of the goals of the project is to honor the remarkable architecture of the building. Our plans for the second floor are to leave the room as it is, and only to add enhancements that allow us to use the space to its maximum. The elevator is more than 30 years old, and it is getting more difficult to find replacement parts. Our budget includes replacing the elevator. Electrical outlets on the top floor are literally in the floor and are more than 10 feet apart. There are very few outlets in the building, which results in the use of long extension cords across the floors and carpets to accommodate laptop and cell phone use. The plan addresses the addition of more convenient electrical outlets. Over the past 2 years, we have secured a $1 million grant from the state library and are working towards raising an additional $1 million through fundraisers, grants, private gifts, pledges, and our endowment funds, which brings us to $2 million. With a project cost of $4 million, we ask that the town meet us halfway, providing $2 million to complete the project. We are counting on the town to support our project and get us over the finish line. As I stated, the cost estimate for our project is $4 million, and our request is that the town funds 50% of the project. The state grant, along with the library's fundraising efforts and our endowment, will cover the other half. Our project has been underway for 3 years. After the passage of the referendum, we will contract with the architect to create to-build drawings. August 2024, we will put the building contract out to bid via the RFQ process. We plan to have shovels in the ground by 2025. I want to thank you all for your time and your consideration, and we would like to end with this short video.
This library is, and everyone will tell you this, everyone that I meet, that it is the center of North Stonington's community. They come back to me a decade, 2 decades later and say, this was the place in this community.
We have so many people who say it's fine as it is, but that's just not the reality. It's just not cutting it for what this community needs.
This is a 110-year-old building with 110-year-old beauty and 110-year-old issues that have never been updated or upgraded.
Right now, only the main floor of the library is air conditioned. We have people come in and say, do you have a private workspace for me here? We have to say, no, we don't. You know, we try to be creative. And I think that we could just do so much more with this renovation, and it will really provide that.
We always are fixing the problem and putting a Band-Aid on the problem so that our community still feels like we are serving them. We're not serving them in the way that we need to.
I am so excited to see the library be everything that it can be.
Any event you go to, you get to look around and see so many people, kind of a bigger, broader spectrum of humans all just spending time.
There's something that nothing else offers, not in this town, not any town. Knowledge, activity, access from age 0 all the way to 100 years old.
Wheeler Library will be going to the town of North Stonington with a request to help us pay for renovations to our building and enhancements to our outside space.
It's a necessary renovation, not just for the library, for the community. That's the whole point of this. This is who we're doing it for.
Thank you. That concludes our presentation. And if there are any questions from anyone or on Zoom, I'm going to hand the mic over to our president, Kate Pronto.
John, before we ask questions from the audience or Zoom, we're going to see if the selectmen have any questions first, then we can turn it over. So Nicole, Pratt, and I have questions also. Okay.
Yeah, I'm good for right now.
Okay, so Last night, we had a tri-board meeting, and there was a couple of questions that came up there, so I thought I'd relay those to you since those people aren't here this evening. One of them was, if you do put air conditioning on the second floor, and we know that each year there's a budget ask by the library. This past year, I think it was $100,000. How will that impact your annual budget ask to the town as far as now you're upgrading the air and the heating and elements? What will that do to your utilities budget?
Well, we don't have an estimate as to how the utilities budget will change from the new system in place, including running air conditioning on all floors, which we're not doing now. It is a very efficient system, and we will be off oil, so but again, we don't have an answer to how the two different utility bills are going to line up side by side. But in terms of our strategy of our support that we ask for from the town, it's not going to impact us in terms of us saying we need more money and therefore the town should be making up the difference for our operating budget costing more money. As you know, for the last 5 years, we've been working on increasing the amount the town is supporting the library, and we're trying to get our town to be supported at the same level other towns in Connecticut are being supported, which is about 1.5% of municipal budget. And we've year over year gone to the town asking for more money toward that goal and have had some success with that, which has been great, and we'll continue with that strategy. But we don't foresee that if our expenses go up, it's going to be the town's responsibility to match the expenses.
Okay, another question that came up last night from a Board of Finance member. If the town was to agree to give you the funding you're looking for, and being that the library is a private entity, not a town library, is there any guarantees the town has that the library wouldn't change the way they operate and became some sort of a more inclusive, or excuse me, exclusive private organization where you might need membership to be?
Oh, no.
I didn't, it wasn't my question.
Yeah, no, I understand, but that's not ever going to be what the library is.
Okay,
Okay. Sorry.
all right, and before we ask questions, one quick story for you. So I had planned on, not last summer, the summer before, of having all the local first selectmen from our abutting towns meet. And I thought what a great place to meet would be in the Wheel Library. It was in July. And about a week before we had the meeting, I talked to Amy and she thought it might not be a good idea because it was going to be about 95 degrees up there. So I moved it to this room. And I know there's not much difference between this room and the second floor of the library, correct?
Mhm.
But it was not anywhere near as impressive as I had hoped it would be to have the other first selectman come and meet me on the second floor of the library. And if it was air conditioned and, temperature controlled, it would have been, and I'm hoping that if this eventually comes to fruition, that I will be able to have that meeting in the second floor of the
Can't
library.
wait. Yeah.
Thank you. We'll open up for questions now for the audience or online. If there's any, just come to this microphone, just say who you are and ask your question. By the way, the Board of Selectmen will not be voting on this evening. We'll be voting on it at our next meeting. And our vote would be to move this or not to move this to the Board of Finance for their consideration. Okay, is there any questions online?
Bob, I just had a comment on that. Why do we need to vote on this at our next meeting? So I know we typically see something and then vote on it at the next meeting, but since we're going through the budget process now, we're going through capital, we're going through our regular budget, and we haven't even moved closer to that. And I know we're hoping that if this does make it through, then we put it on the referendum for the budget. But why the need to vote so soon?
So there's not a need, it's just following a process. So, and actually the way this process is working, we have plenty of time because our hope is to, if we go to referendum, it would be the same time as the budget. So, which doesn't happen until May. So we do have time. If the Board of Selectmen did not want to vote on this in the next meeting, we wouldn't have to, but we would want to get a vote on this sooner than instead of later, so at least the library knows if we're moving forward or not. But it doesn't have to be the next meeting. There's no rule for that.
So I would ask if we do lump this in with the budget referendum. Does that go along with your timeline? And that would be in May? In May.
Typically, the first Monday of May would be the town meeting. By ordinance, that's when we're supposed to have a town meeting. And then between 7 and 14 days after that meeting would be the referendum.
Yeah, we had, talked about possibly having the referendum be a standalone vote. And we were talking about the timeline of March. And I think that would be our preference, but if, the town is, the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance feel that it should be bundled with the May vote, then that would work with our timeline.
So just to address that for a minute. Having a standalone referendum, one is it's expensive. It costs the town money to have a referendum because we have to pay for poll workers and we feed the poll workers when they're here and so on. So that's an expense to the town, and you could get some pushback saying this is not, even though it's a part of our town, the library, it's not a town business, right? So that's one. Secondly, to have the townspeople vote on this in March and not having a hearing on what the budget is going to present, it's almost doing them a disservice to say you're voting on something not knowing what's coming down the road with the budget. Are we increasing? Are we decreasing? Are we staying the same? So I think if we did it when we're doing the budget, then there's total transparency. Transparency on, here's the budget, here's the library asset, separate question on the same day, which we've done multiple questions on the budget day before, then all taxpayers know exactly where they stand. I would hate to have, let's say the library did pass, and then because of whatever happened in the budget process, there's a large increase in the budget and in the mill rate. Well, some of the voters may say, well, if I knew that back in March, I would have voted differently. So I'd rather have all the cards on the table. It's just my opinion.
It makes sense. We of course would prefer to, be the only, item on the referendum for the very reason it's the flip side of the argument. We'd rather have people specifically focusing on, that item alone and taking it as a standalone, but I completely understand why it makes sense to put it on the budget.
Would you feel the same if it was a standalone item and came after the budget? Which I wouldn't do that either, because again, it costs us money to have a referendum,
Yeah.
but would that?
I don't know, I haven't thought about that.
So, I think that, again, I think that with the budget's a question every year, and not knowing until we have the hearings in April and May, then, to voting something 2 months early, it could be perceived that we're not getting the voter doesn't have all the facts before they vote. Secondly, a budget referendum typically gets a bigger turnout than a standalone referendum. So and this board's always wanted to have as big a voice as possible by the taxpayer. If we can get 800 to 1,000 voters on the budget and versus 300 voters on a standalone referendum, which we could get that smaller number, it's a bigger voice by the town if we do it when there's going to be more voters. Again, just my opinion on that. You can chip in. Does two selectmen want to comment?
I agree 100%. I think the only way this works, if it works, is at budget time and at that referendum, because you do want as many people to come out as possible. But if any of you have been following the budget process, we're just in the infancy, and it's a big ask for capital this year. It's a big ask. We haven't seen the operational budget yet, but we have a prediction that it'll be higher based on inflation and everything else. So I think to give the residents the biggest and the clearest picture, it makes the most sense to do it at the same time. But because it will have a tax implication on the residents, and so will the new capital that we just sent over to Board of Finance last week, 2 weeks ago. And this kind of fits in with that capital request with our budget, because you guys, just like the fire department, they're a fire company, they have a request for our operating budgets, and then they have their capital request. This is similar to that, which it's a capital request. You also ask for money for the operating budget. So I just think it makes sense to do it at that time frame if we get that far. Because personally, I would hate, like Bob said, to either vote yes or no prior, go through the budget, that gets yes or no, And then people realize that tax implication on them all together. And some people might not understand how that works or that real impact they'll have on it. So,
I have just a couple of thoughts and a question. How much wiggle room, if any, is the $2 million ask as far as, let's say it does go to referendum and it doesn't pass, at $2 million? How much room do you have to work with, if we went back with a lower number? And how would that impact the
So you're
project?
saying it doesn't pass during the budget, so there's a second referendum that's a standalone. I mean, we don't have a plan for that at this point. You know, if it doesn't pass, it's a very different project and we have to regroup and decide if we want to go back to referendum or if we're going to just do a much different project. So I think that's the best way to answer that.
So just to elaborate on that too, Nicole, I think that's a good point. So there's not a plan B at this point. So you have $2 million that you have of your own, right? You've got the $1 million
Right.
you're fundraising plus
Mhm.
your endowment and the $1 million grant.
Mhm.
So there's $2 million, so that's half the project cost. Is there a plan B to say we can do the air conditioning and the heating and do that part without the outside of the building, without doing some of the other renovations and doing a plan that would take over years, maybe 3,
Yeah.
5 years, or this is kind of an all or nothing type
Yeah.
of thing?
I think Amy wants to.
Just push the button, hold it.
Hi, I'm Amy Kennedy, Director of the Library. The state library grant that we received for $1 million is really contingent on this plan. It's based on this plan. And I think that if the referendum didn't pass, which I believe very strongly the referendum will pass based on community support that we already have. If it didn't pass, I think we would actually have to write to the state. We would have to change the project entirely, and we might have to give the money back to them. Because when we did the application to them, we had to give them a plan of what we were going to do. And that's what this presentation is based on. So I think there's a good chance we could lose that grant or a substantial part of it if we didn't do the entire project.
Amy, what's the deadline on that grant? Is there a hard?
We have quite a long time to actually finish the project. We have to show matching funds by this November.
Thank you.
So I completely understand the benefits of putting this in with the budget referendum. I do think that it could seem overwhelming to the taxpayer for good reason, but I do think that we're going to need to really take a look at how we explain the project and the support. We've definitely seen the support from the library for the library over last year's budget season. I do agree that there's support out there. I do worry that lumping it all in with one is going to seem overwhelming. And I think we're really going to have to do a good job at a town meeting explaining why and what we want to do to get it passed.
And from our end, I mean, we have a plan to work very hard at communicating and educating and getting the vote out. Again, I think if it were a separate issue, it would be a much easier job having to have it, you know, on a vote where, as you say, there's, you know, quite an impact of increase and that you have to make the decision. It forces you to kind of make a decision. What do I want and what do I think I don't, you know, I don't need, I think, when it's all lumped together.
Right. So when I look at it that way as well, I mean, it could devastate our budget as well. It could totally tank our operating budget and our capital budget if they see so many things, or if they vote yes for the library and no for our budget. there's implications there. And honestly, $2 million it's a large ask, and we know that. I mean, we went back and forth with the fire company over new fire trucks or new ambulances for, life and safety. So it's hard when we say no to the fire department for a $1.1 million ask for a new truck that they need because theirs is 30 years old. I do wrestle, and I'll be upfront with it, I do wrestle with just putting it straight through with a $2 million ask straight through to the community in regards to every budget that we see or every request that comes in from an entity through the budget season. We go through and say, yes, they want this, but when we look at everything the town needs, it doesn't make sense for us to be able to put that through because we have to balance the needs of the whole community, not just one entity over another. So those are the challenges that we're going to have to work through and try to figure those things out. But I just want the community to know, just because we say things up here, we're talking about $2 million, not $2 million. It's not that we're not supportive of the library at all. Just like it doesn't mean we're not supportive of the fire company or the ambulance company or the highway department that needs 8 new trucks and a front end loader for a few $1 million. So as we work through this, it does need to be communicated to the public. And what I do worry about a separate referendum is it is great, and you guys will work on targeting or getting the vote out. But just like the meetings, when there's something presented, you'll see a big group from whoever's presenting and in full support of that. And the people that aren't here doesn't mean they're either supportive or non-supportive. Sometimes they don't know about it, or sometimes they're not educated about it to be here. So I do worry that if we have a separate referendum, it could be a one-sided referendum. So if we don't do a great job about getting the vote out as a whole, and the library does a great job about getting your supporters out, which you hope you do, we also have to get it out to the people that don't pay attention. I told someone this story the other day. I was driving down the road, and I saw this older couple loading their outdoor wood boiler, and they're chopping the wood. They're going through it. And I talked to someone that knows them, and they do it because they have to save their dollars. They have to save on their home heating. They don't pay attention to what's going on in town. They do come out and vote, but they don't always come out as prepared as they should, or it could be, I guess you would say. So I do worry about those voters that are struggling in the community, that might not understand the impact that a $2 million ask from one entity has compared to the ones that we're looking at now as well. So that's where I wrestle with just one referendum with could be a one-sided response.
So, I'll save my last comment for the end.
Okay, so we've had comment. Yes, we'll do is you can come up and either make a comment or ask a question. So John, sure.
I can see it.
I guess 2 quick comments. One is that I think maybe unlike some other asks, that the library is asking for $2 million, but is also coming forward with $2 million. So I've been in town for a long time, and typically when there's an ask for something large, they're not coming up with half the money themselves. So I think this is a little bit of apples and oranges from what I've seen elsewhere. So I just want people that are out there listening to know, again, we're coming forward with best efforts to, well, we will have half the projects. And then 2, we didn't want to bring up how this, if a referendum comes up and how a $2 million ask would go through the budget. We assume it wouldn't be all in 1 year, but we know that's what the Board of Finance is here to do, and others, if this does get passed. We weren't kind of under the assumption that the ask would go all into 1 year. And that seems like it would be a budget buster, but we leave that to the select people. the Board of Finance to figure out what's the best way, if we do, pass the referendum, to, work on that part of the budget.
Thank you, John. Any other comments or questions? Dick?
Okay, can everybody hear me? Okay. How about this building is importance to this building is importance to you. Richardson only lived 40 now. So there's not that many towns around that have this kind of mass that is anywhere near as important as this building is. My biggest fear in looking at the first plan of the renderings was that, geez, what's a ramp going to do to the symmetry of the front of that building? Going to take away the stairs? Is it going to interfere in any way with the symmetry of the building and actually the architecture of the country, which is the center point of that? No, actually, the architect has been very clever. The way they're bringing in that ramp from the side, I think, doesn't do any damage to the historicity or the appearance of that building at all. I'm very pleased with that. The idea that the architect and the library board together have figured out how to do that without really damaging is very cool. I hear the commentary about the cost of this versus the cost of that. And if we're talking about the cost of schools for everyday life, if we talk about that, we talk about the library. The library is the center of our practically our entire social structure in this town. But more importantly, it's a component of the education. Those are the tools of the future. But the Historic Society is very much in favor. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dick. Don't misunderstand when we speak. If you hear something that maybe you consider to be negative in your train of thought, we represent the entire town, and unless you can assure me that the entire town is either for or against the project, we have to represent both sides. So it's our job to vet out by asking questions that we might not ask ourselves, but we think somebody else might ask. So the best thing we can do is get all the information out and let the voter, let the taxpayer decide, correct? So. And we only have 5,200 bosses, so. Gary, did you raise your hand? You did raise your hand, so. Brian?
Still have somebody take it.
Hear me? Oh, I can hear myself. Brian Rathbun, 263 Grindstone Hill Road, North Stonington. The Wheeler Library was built, I believe anyways, because there was a need in town way, way, way back. A lot longer than any of us have been around. That was by the Wheeler family. I believe they also did it because of their love the vision and the spirit of North Stonington. That to me would have been the inspiration, if I had the money, of the Wheeler thing. It's a magnificent building. I don't know how many people have been down to Avery Point to see the Branford House, but it's very similar inside to our Wheeler Library. We're very lucky to have that woodworking in there. The small staff that works in that library has programs for children, for families. They have programs from authors and other people that want to write books. They have programs for parents. They have dinners. They have art exhibits. And many activities that are convenient for everybody in town and also out of town. There's no age limit on the people that can use our library. I believe the money being asked for, obviously, because of the presentation, was well thought through by the library committee. I think it would be money well spent. Best bang for our buck, if you want to say that. I personally do not want to be part of a generation that neglects moving our library forward. Now, I know that's totally against a lot of times when I come up here and speak about our taxes. But as a person in this town that has been in that library, as a little kid, we used to go upstairs and we listened to that librarian tell us the story. I can imagine the kids in our town. Little kids that could go up there and listen or just be in that library at these activities. And when they get to my age, speak to the people that are alive then and say that generation respected the Wheeler Library and the Wheeler family so much, had the same spirit, had the same love, had the same vision to keep that library going in this town. And weren't afraid to take out their wallet and say, yes, we will give them, we will support them, to give them the money that they're asking for. Because we can save an institution in our town that's been here longer than, as far as I can remember, any other institution except for some of the churches. And I think that's one of the most important things that our town's got to look at is, what do we want to do with North Stonington? Do we want to save our heritage? Do we want to keep our society going? Or do we want to just change it to where it doesn't even look like North Stonington anymore? That's the questions I have, and I would urge the selectmen to at least move this forward. Don't hesitate. Remember the old saying, you hesitate, you get lost. Please move it forward, give it your blessing, and move on. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Brian, I think I've heard you speak about 100 times. I've never seen you get emotional like that. So that means your heart is in what you said. Thank you. Is there any other discussion, any other comments? If not, we'll close the discussion and move on with the rest of our meeting. Okay. Nicole?
Yeah, so I have a process question for us. So it's, the onus is going to be, can they not hear? Oh. is the onus on us to now or when we vote to, am I stop?
She's gonna minimize the screen so that way you can be on camera.
Okay.
Sorry, you just wanted to be on camera, huh? Sorry, Nicole.
It is going to be up to us to come up and research the changes to taxes based on a $2 million bond over a certain number of years. Is that our job to do that? If we decide to move it forward, and at what point? So I have a little bit of a different opinion. To me, I don't necessarily see what waiting the next meeting or the meeting after. I know that we have time if we're going to lump it in with the May referendum, but to me, it's not an option to at least move it forward to the Board of Finance. This is something I think so important that I do think that the people just need to decide. It will be, Amy, I pray that you're right. I worry, just because I'm so excited to get this project started. So I think we really have to make sure we're doing our homework to educate all of the community to make them understand how important this is. But to me, not moving it forward to the Board of Finance isn't like an option, and I'm prepared to do that tonight. Like, what are we going to gain in not moving it forward tonight to the Board of Finance?
So we've kind of, since we've been in office, we've always said we didn't want to vote on something the first time we saw it. Not that this is the first time, but it's the first time it's been presented officially. And just staying with that concept of waiting and not voting that same night. To me, moving it to the next meeting, which is only a week from now, is not the end of the world. And it gives us some chance to reflect on what we've heard. Not that we're going to change our minds. I think we probably each have our own idea of what we want to move forward. As far as the process, we're moving forward the concept at this point, not the, we know what the bottom line is, $2 million. We don't know how we're going to get there. That's up to the Board of Selectmen. We'll work with bonding agents to see what our best, because we've bonded before for things, what our best dollar value is, what kind of interest rate we can get. Is it going to be a 5-year, a 10-year, 15-year? What kind of bond are we looking for? And then how does that impact the taxpayer with the mill rate? So that's our job, to present that at a town meeting down the road. But right now, we would be moving it to the Board of Finance, who then would take that same concept if they wanted to. If they say, yes, we think it should go to a town meeting, send it back to us to call for that town meeting, and then eventually a referendum. So that's the process. I'm not, okay, so I'm kind of between. I don't want to vote on it tonight. I think next week's fine because I want to reflect on it some more. Again, I don't think I'm going to change my mind, but I think because we've done that in the past, I don't want to start doing it differently. But I'm also not in favor of moving it past next week. Yes, Brett said there's not a hurry, and there isn't, but I think it just lets the town know at this point where we stand. It's not saying we're voting to approve the whole project. We're approving moving it forward, and it gives the people in the library that support the library, knowing they're not waiting either. Know it, okay, we've got through, if they do, they've gone through stage 1, and now it's on to stage 2.
So, I mean, we have actually more than a couple Board of Finance members in the audience. Is the expectation that if we move it forward next week to you, that we present you with all of the options? Like, here's where we'd be looking at a 10-year bond. This is what it would do to the mill rate. What is it that the Board of Finance is going to expect from us as the next step?
Well, let me tell you what I expect that we would give them is the same presentation they heard tonight. The library would come back and present to the Board of Finance, because they're not all here, do the same type of presentation that they've given to us. But unless they ask for something different, that doesn't give us much time to get that information on bonding and interest rates. So I would hope that they would accept this kind of presentation and decide on the concept, knowing that before we go to a town meeting, we would have that, what the impact is.
Okay.
So,
I could be wrong on that. The Board of Finance could say something different.
so part of the reason that I mentioned, I don't know why it's so twangy, but holding off and looking at the full budget, because so as Board of Selectmen, our role is to superintend the needs of the town, the whole town. And as we go through the budget process, I think it's silly for us to think that this does not have implications on the Board of Ed budget, of their sports van, of the fire department's truck, ladder, when we order that rescue truck. And now, Brian, I loved his talk right here, but Brian and I talked earlier today, and he's in favor of the library, but he will not support the school system because of overall taxes. So we can't pretend that this does not have an impact. And I wrestle when we vote to just send things through to the Board of Finance and let other people decide some of the things that we have to look at. And I'm going to move this farther away. Because we are in Board of Finance, we're the board that looks at everything that's coming in financially. So when we vote and we do an affirmative vote and say, I vote to send it to the Board of Finance, we're not voting to send it to the Board of Finance. We're voting to approve the $2 million request. And it does go to the Board of Finance, but it goes to the Board of Finance because we as selectmen voted in the affirmative on this request. Just like when we vote on our budget, we say, we believe in this budget, we want to send this to the Board of Finance. So I hear what you guys are saying about let the town decide, but I'd also like your opinions on, do you support this $2 million ask as a whole, knowing the rest of the budget process is still upon us?
As a taxpayer or a selectman
Both.
or,
Well, I mean, as a selectman, because that's our role right now.
I mean, we talk all the time, and so does the Board of Finance, about how it rests on our shoulders to support and represent all residents. There's no way we are going to be able to know how all residents or the majority of residents would vote. So in my opinion, I disagree respectfully with we're not voting in the affirmative to fund it. We're voting to move it forward to let the town decide whether they can afford it and are going to fund it with all of the details. Like, the onus will be on us to get all of the details and how it affects. And we talked last night about how it needs to be broken down for the resident as far as how much it is going to affect somebody who owns this particular, size home with these taxes. Everybody wants to understand how it's going to affect us. Brian, who literally moved me to tears up here, completely wholeheartedly supports it. But until all of us take a look at what it's going to mean for every single resident, only they can decide, and we are part of they. So that's why I have absolutely no problem tonight voting to move it forward. I'm completely fine with waiting till next week as well. But to your point, what's going to change? It's not like if we say, no, $2 million is way too much, what's your plan B? They're right now, they don't have a particular plan B. So saying we can't really fund 2 million, but we could fund $1 million. We could fund $1.25 million. It's not like we can say that because
Well, we
this
can't,
is
so
the,
to me, we can. We could say, we believe based on just like we do on the capital requests. I look at it the same way, even though they're a private entity. I look at it the same way. The fire department, our departments ask for this. We go through it painstakingly and for hours, and then we realize we cut $30,000. But we never send anything straight through dollar value to the residents, without us looking at the whole picture. So like roughly, with rough math, I mean, if you did a 10-year bond, this is like a $500,000 increase. So if this is a $500,000 increase and we haven't even figured out the rest of the budget yet, if we send that through and know that's on there, we also need to know that implication when it goes to the town. If that gets voted yes, and say ours get voted no. Now we're back and we have to make up for that $500,000 increase by cutting the school, the town departments. Last night at our tri-board meeting, we wrestled over an $8,000 safety sign of who was going to pay for it. And we went round and who's going to pay for it to flash out in front of our school to slow kids down for $8,000. So I wrestle with us saying, okay, 2 million, let's the town decide without us even knowing where that budget is even near. So what if that budget comes into us with a say a 1 mil increase, 1.5 mil increase like we've seen before. Now we add a $500,000 to that. We're at a 2 mil increase for our residents. And that could change based on the vote, but if that goes through and we don't even have a handle on our budget during the process, we could really be putting the town in jeopardy as a whole. And that's what I wrestle with. I love the library and I'd love to give them it, just like I'd love to give the fire department all the trucks that they want. But we go through this process and we, like I said, last year, we went through for an hour and cut $5,000 one time. And we're like, this is tough. So I wrestle with just sending it through before we even have a ballpark of where we are with inflation, especially the Board of Ed and our highway department, our biggest expense, and the town's biggest expense being the school system. I really wrestle with that. I mean, we look at things like our rec fields. Our rec fields are a disaster. We never put through, and I know how Brian feels about rec, but we never put through increases to say, you know what, we really need to sink $50,000 into that because we are so cautious of the taxpayers' dollars and not having huge tax increases that it really is a struggle for me to say straight 2 million. Now, to me, it might be $1 million that we say, you know what, we're confident. But when I look at it, when we vote to send it through, we should be able to stand behind that and say, we feel this is the best movement for the town as a whole, because we have to be up there and advocate for it. We voted to send it to the community. And that's the same thing with the budget and our capital expenditures. It's the same process. It's just a different question.
Okay, so I would just rebuttal on that. I agree with you. We have a job to vet everything out to the best of our ability so the taxpayer can decide. I don't think that by us moving forward at this point, saying that we're advocating for the $2 million, I think we're advocating to move it forward to get more information from the taxpayer. And we have time. So if we don't vote on this until next week, which is what I would like to do, it doesn't mean we got to go to the Board of Finance on the very next meeting, and then they're probably not going to vote on it the first night either. So we're looking at probably 30 to 45 days before it comes back to us. And we have time before we call for if the town meeting's in May, we don't have to call for that town meeting until sometime in April. So we have plenty of time to vet it out when we'll be farther down the budget. But when you say nothing's going to pass without the taxpayer voting yes or no, so to me, to give them as much knowledge as possible, it still lies in their lap to decide what is best for the town as a taxpayer. We can imagine, we know. I mean, we don't talk to all 5,200 residents on a regular basis, but we do have small groups that come into this room and we hear what they have to say, but we don't know how that's like right now. I guarantee if we did a vote right now, it would pass. Right. So, but that would not be our job. Our job is to try to get as many people informed as possible. So I would think that we have plenty of time to vet it out by going to the Board of Finance, who then probably won't vote the first time, maybe in their second meeting, after they've heard the presentation on the first, come back to us. And there's nothing saying we have to send it to a town meeting. We can't right away because there's a process. So,
but if we vote to send it to the Board of Finance, the motion would be to approve the $2 million ask to send to the Board of Finance, because that's what it has to be.
well,
That's the process, just like we vote on the budget. So, and
and I don't agree with that. I disagree because on the budget, we've had 4 budgets voted on in 1 year. 4 or 5 years ago, it was in November. We were still voting on budget.
right, but we voted to start because we believed in well, we weren't there then. Our budget went through the first time, but we voted to send it through because that's the budget. And that's the process of any vote. If you look up our form of government, that's why we,
You're done.
yeah, that's, I don't know why that's doing, let me try to.
I bet your mind works. So,
Yeah, back in there. That's the process of our form of government.
our
It-
form of government is a town meeting form of government.
Through,
Town meeting form of government.
right, through
Not
selectmen.
Board of Selectmen form of government.
No, but that is how,
Still,
okay, so I didn't get to your answer.
all right, go ahead.
So as the chief administrative officer of the town that oversees the whole process and looks at every department and every expense, and then when we factor in the Board of Ed, do you support,
I give up.
do you support a $2 million request?
I support getting as much information we can to the taxpayer, have the taxpayer decide. At the time, if it gets to that point where we're going to a town meeting, then I will tell you this, to go to referendum, they'll tell you if I support it or not. But yes, I want to get as much information and get as much feedback as possible. You know,
And I think that's where I see where you're wrestling, but I don't feel that weight. I don't feel the $2 million weight on just my third of this on that shoulder, because that is going to be on the 5,200 residents.
Right.
That vote for the 500.
So then why don't we send the budget through the first time without any changes or the capital?
We do. We send it to the Board of Finance. The Board of Finance then sends it back to us to cut.
We go through the budget and we cut before we send it to the finance, always. In my 14 years of being on board, there's never been a budget that I've seen that came from the selectmen without them ever going through it and cutting capital and cutting expenses before it goes to the Board of Finance, because we're looking at the whole process. I mean, if you're comfortable doing that, it's fine. Like, obviously, I'm the lone vote here, because as you talk about getting more information, that's what I'd like to do. I'd like to know where we stand completely in this process, because of our asks from the other departments are so great. I mean, we started off with, just like we did the other night. If you looked at the capital request in the beginning of the request, it was almost $1 million for this year. We brought it down to 620, 630. So we didn't send that through as a $1 million request. We said, you know what? We can't support that. Our taxpayers can't support that. And we made those decisions. So I guess my question is, why is it different that we can't look at the full financial picture?
Well, I do want to echo what Jonathan said. The fire department does not, no disrespect to the fire department. The fire department does not come and say, we need a $1.2 million fire truck, but we're going to fund $500,000 of it. They come and they say, we need a $1.2 million fire truck, and we figure out how to pay for it. I'm not comparing the services that the library has with the services that EMS has.
I think we all. Please don't take that.
Quote me, don't, put it on social media, but they're offering a service that they're asking the townspeople to help fund 50% of. So I do think that it is a little bit of a difference. And I'll just kind of ask the same question a different way. Again, completely fine waiting till next meeting. But I am not hearing that us whittling that down to 1.5 is going to work. And frankly, I'll be honest, if we have to go back to the drawing board with all the work that's been done already without allowing the entire town to decide whether they find 2 million palatable, that I think we're going to end up getting more backlash for in not moving it forward to let them decide. So I think you're feeling the weight of the world on your shoulders with that $2 million. I don't necessarily feel that weight yet. I do think that our job is to move it forward, get all the facts, and let the town decide. That's why I don't feel as kind of pressured and panicky over 2 million as you are right now. It's for us collectively to decide, not just us, the three of us.
Right, and I understand that. I just don't know why that process is different than the other capital requests. And to your point about the fire company, you're right, it is different. They are putting up half, but let's remember, they are a private entity. When we put up money for the fire trucks, the town owns those fire trucks and owns those assets. Huge difference, really large difference. Sure.
Well, hold on.
If I said something, I go ahead.
Ooh, they're lining up, Brad.
Click it one more time.
Sorry, this is Amy. I just want to say that I think the town should feel blessed that the library is a private institution that has an endowment, that is able to have an annual appeal, that is able to do private fundraising. Otherwise, we would be here with a $3 million ask. I think that it's really important to remember the generosity of the Wheeler family and understand that being a private entity is not a bad thing for this town, to not have to manage 100% of the library, to not have to pay benefits for all of its employees, to not have to be 100% responsible for the maintenance of that building and its upkeep of a building that's 123 years old. I just think it's important to remember that it's not a bad thing for this library to be private. It's private in all the good ways, but it is a public library, open and welcoming to every single person in North Stonington.
So Gary and 91 Main Street, Board of Finance, neighbor to the library, trustee emeritus, which I'm gonna have to figure out how to deal with this on the Board of Finance, but my question is the board, the library board. You know, we're throwing around numbers with a lot of zeros, and I'm just questioning how much softness there is in those numbers, and is there within that 4 million contingency to adapt to the unforeseen that you might come across? And the only reason I'm saying it now is so you have time, because I'm going to ask when you come to the Board of Finance. But I'm also sending a message as a taxpayer to the Board of Selectmen that the town needs the opportunity to, in my perspective, to understand what we're undertaking here and what is the potential exposure and what's the potential impacts and outcomes. And somehow in this mechanism, we got to make sure the town knows what's going on. We can't, jump from here to the Board of Finance to the referendum without that opportunity for people that are curious to ask those questions. So there was one question. How much contingency do you have in the 4 million? So how much unassigned cost is in there in case the second-story bathroom triggers the septic system, or you find something in the ceiling you don't expect?
We have a cost estimate that is going to be in the packet that we provide to the Board of Selectmen, and Board of Finance, and we've supplied it to the Board of Finance, Selectmen, excuse me. And in it, there are some contingency, built in, there is some contingency built into it. But to your point, this is a cost estimate that was done in 2022. There was also an allocation in the estimate for increases. So there's some cushion in there, but we fully intend that, understand that there can be things, and there probably will be things that are going to come up in the project that are unforeseen.
Any other comments? Brian? Is anybody else going to come before Brian? Only because he is second time around, but Sean? Be right with you, Brian.
First thing on my notes is Board of Finance or Board of Selectmen recommend for
resources forward. We seem to have gotten away from the Board of Selectmen taking position on things. Happens at budget times, happens, you know, with this, you're talking about moving it forward. I think it's important as the elected official, the people of this town elected you to represent them. They don't know the ins and outs of the project. They haven't sat through meetings and so forth. They really want to hear what the Board of Selectmen have to say about a project. You're not deciding, you know, there's nothing wrong with taking a position. It's, you know, it's going to go to a vote anyway. But I think the townspeople want to hear that Board of Selectmen either recommended a project or didn't recommend it. So tonight, you know, as far as a vote tonight or next week or whatever, I don't feel that the Board of Selectmen have enough information to make a recommendation. You don't approve anything. You recommend. And I think that much more information is needed by the Board of Selectmen to take a position, to recommend or not recommend. I would hope that you would consider, before voting on this project to move it forward, that you actually, I mean, sure, you could go to the Board of Finance to get some input. You could go to your treasurer to get information on bonding or other ways to finance the project. But before you take and decide whether you recommend to the town people that this is a sound project that we could, that the townspeople can afford it, you ought to have the information available to you.
So Sean, just on that question, so if we moved it to the Board of Finance, it comes back to us to go to a town meeting, correct? It goes to the Board of Finance back, only the Board of Selectmen can call a town meeting. So we would have ample time at that Board of Selectmen meeting to either move it to a town meeting or not. Even if the Board of Finance says they approve moving it forward, it's still up to us to call a town meeting. So that would probably be happening 6 to 8 weeks from now that we've gone through that process up to that point. At that point, I think the Board of Selectmen would have much more information than we do tonight. And then that's when we could either recommend to move forward to a town meeting or not, correct?
The one issue that the Board of Finance is going to have a hard time with is the fact that how does this play fit with the budget itself? And how are they going to be able to take a position on it when they don't know what they're going to do with the budget, with the budget? Do they want to, you know, what's the mill rate increase total? Because you have to can't look at just this project and the budget separately. That you have to look at totally what's it going to do to the mill rate. So,
But they are the Board of Finance. So if we recommend it to them, there's no timeline for them to get back to us. So they can take their time and they can do that information, as you said, with the help of the town treasurer. We can look at bonding, look at alternative financing, and get that information to the Board of Finance before they send it back to the Board of Selectmen, correct?
I think they need more information, and that is typically the first selectman and the treasurer working on financing options, whether it be to go to our bond council and get some estimates, or whether it be to start talking with the USDA. We've had good luck with the USDA on loans, and it saves on bonding costs a lot. So I think it's the Board of Finance is there to look at the big picture. I don't know, I mean, I don't want to speak with them, but I would think they'd want to look at the total picture. They'd want the information from the bond counsel, from the first selectman, with the help of the treasurer. But more information is needed before you could take a position.
And if that's requested from the Board of Selectmen, we can get that information prior to them voting on it.
You're gonna move it forward before you have that
So
information?
if we moved it forward for them to at least start discussing it, and then that gives us, if we move it forward at our next meeting to whenever Board of Finance meeting, we want to move it forward too. That gives us time to gather some information, correct?
You don't have to take a vote, and either way, it's just ask that to be put on their agenda for review. I mean, you don't have to take a position tonight on the project, which would be conceived as taking a position on the project, until you have all the information.
Right.
I just, I had the same concerns as Brett. I think it should be, why is it not being included in the budget? Same vote, not the same night, not the same referendum, but the budget. Because the townspeople, when they go to vote on the budget, they're even though they were saying you're approving the expenses, technically, when they vote on a budget, they're approving the expenses. They're not approving the mill rate. But we all know that their concern is what the mill rate change is going to be. So if you take this and do it separately or as a separate question, then they don't know the total impact that they're voting on. And I feel it should be and I've been to meetings, we know how behind we are at funding capital. I think it needs to be considered along with other town needs and prioritize all of those needs at one time versus signaling it out as a separate question or a vote before or a vote after. And I ask that you consider doing it, putting it, if you believe in it, and once you get information, if you believe in it, then include it in the general government budget that goes to the Board of Finance.
Was the emergency services building included in the budget? I know it's part of the debt redemption, but was it included in the budget?
No, the school project and that were done separately, like mid-budget season. And those are quite different scenarios as far as the millions of dollars that are in that.
Well, the firehouse was 6 million, so you can say that's difference, 3 times more, but it's still a large sum of money and it was included in the budget. It was a separate question, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't disagree with some of your thought process, and we can talk more about it. Thank you.
Thanks.
Anything else for this evening on this before we table this? Oh, sorry, Brian. You can go and speak.
No, no. Okay. I just want to make one thing clear. I know when we talked today, and you mentioned that I wasn't supportive of the school, but it's not the school I'm against. I'd like to see, and I've been to a lot of taxes. I'd like to see the school budget not increase simply because I'd like to see them meet a budget. I mentioned that to you. Just like we have our personal budgets, I have to meet my personal budget. I'd like to see the school at least 1 year stay within the budget from last year. That's what I was getting at. I wanted to clear that up because, we got people with arrows around here, so.
One other question. Has all the potential grants been explored, or is there a potential for one to come through as this process is going that could decrease that request from the town?
So we have somebody that we've hired who's working with us, Kat Edwards, and one of her areas that she's working on is grants, so he's best to answer the
Okay,
question.
great.
Suzanne? It's a little difficult to get these kinds of grants. So, a lot of typical, the old fashioned nonprofits like Carnegie and all those, Kresge, are no longer supporting capital projects. They have changed their focus to diversity, equity, inclusion grants. So across the board, it's been really difficult for me to find grants. We did apply for a very large grant through the federal government for the USDA. That's, but it's been held up in Congress. It actually might get voted on this week. And it's been, as you know, what's going on in DC right now. So that's like at least a 4 or 5 month delay, but but I think Emily might know what the total was. It was 1.5 million. So and then I'm working on a lot of smaller grants, like one at a time. I applied for an ALA national grant. It's a Library Association 20 grant. I'm applying for multiple grants through the community foundations, which I think we can get about 60,000 also this year. So I am doing it. I'm constantly doing it. It's not easy the way it used to be to do those large capital projects. But I feel like we can bring in, at this point, we're aiming for about 100,000. We were hoping before this project started to look at maybe getting 200,000. But I'm going to keep working on it. That's something that we can do as the project goes along as well. For instance, the handicap access, I mean, we can get grants for that, you know, so that, and all that adds up and it's really helpful.
I guess during this, if you're continuing to look at grants and we move it forward, how do could we do a motion or something in the future that says up to the 2 million, obviously I know we can do that, but any grants that come in during that time reduce the town's input expense and not just the libraries.
I mean, I'm not sure if you guys are allowed to do that or not with your town government. I know that originally we're taking $500,000 out of our endowment, which you never want to touch your endowment, right? So our thought was if any more grants come in, that'd be less money we'd have to take out of the endowment. But if you can do something like that, it might be interesting to look at.
Okay, so I think we can table this discussion for this evening. I think it was a really healthy discussion, a lot of good points brought on from all points of view, I believe. We will tackle this at a future meeting. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for the library for the presentation. And I'm sure we'll be talking at a future meeting. Thank you. We're going to move on the agenda. Call for January 22nd, 2024 town meeting. Do you guys have a copy of?
Yeah. So regarding the town meeting, can you just, so the one that we haven't talked about is the private roads approved for town maintenance, the Armstrong Pentway. Can you just touch base on what that
Sure.
is and what that
So did you get in your packet the 2016, it was 2016, when Sean was the first selectman, we had a ordinance that named 8 roads and had different levels of maintenance given to it. That should have been in your packet. I think you have it. And so the Armstrong Pentway at the time was considered a road that would have very minimum improvement. Basically, it said it's a 0.41 mile of unimproved road, occasionally provide material, plow, sand after all accepted roads. That's where we stand. So up in between now and then, what we've done is we've dropped material there that they've moved around. They've graded the road themselves, but we have plowed it and sanded it as needed. Again, after all the other town roads were done. The 2 gentlemen that were doing that are getting older, and they actually did some research, and they found that in 1942, believe it or not, the town actually took over that road as a town road. And I've got the resolution when it happened. And they started out by forming a small group to investigate and decide whether this should be a town road or not. All they're asking for is not to be paved. They're not asking for guardrails. They're not asking for improving up to to what most of our town roads are. They're asking for the same limited, grading and plowing and sealing that we see on Billings Road Extension. We see it on Cranberry Bog Road. We see it on Patricia Ave, and we see it on Wrights Road. So saying we're just saying we're getting old, we can't move it around. We've got this 1942 resolution said it, the town took it over, which I have a copy of. You're more than welcome to have it, and we may have copies for the people at the town meeting. But they're just saying, can you just move us to that category? So instead of dumping material and then we move it, can you just possibly grade the road once or twice a year as needed, that you do on those other roads that were approved that evening? Because this was a ordinance, we can't change an ordinance without going back to a town meeting. So it's very minimal change that they want, but they think they have proof that the town should do it because of that committee that was formed in 1942 in the resolution that was heard at the time.
So that's distinguishing why we would choose Armstrong Kent Way for this and not other private roads.
Right, because of the information that was found back in 1942.
So Bob, was that voted on in 1942?
It was voted on in 1942 to form a committee to investigate it, and a committee was formed. We can't find anywhere in the selectmen's minutes that it was approved or not approved. But I will say that it was at least looked at by it was looked at by a small committee to determine whether this should be, this .41 length of road should be used as, should be considered a town road.
But we don't know what the outcome.
We're not gonna, there's no way of knowing because we can't find the files from the Board of Select Committee from that time period.
And the reason I ask, I think I mentioned this once before when we talk about private roads, is I know like Billings Road or Cedars comes up similar. So we made them change the name, and we don't grade it, they do it themselves, but we plow it. So will this have impact on the people that live on those roads that say, hey, why aren't you looking at my road too? So I'm hesitant on that one because yes, they talked about it in a study, but if it went to a town meeting back then, or it was voted on back then, I'd feel a lot more comfortable saying, okay, the paperwork didn't get done correctly and we're redoing it. But should we be looking, or have the highway department look at those other few roads that do come up in conversation sometimes
Well,
and say,
I think if Cedar Road went back and found this kind of documentation, I would say, yes, we'd have to look at it.
but so that was from the 40s, right? So if we're looking at that today, because we don't know if they decided that, wouldn't it make sense for us to look at those other roads and decide together and not just pick one single road out because those residents came to us recently and asked? Because I know on Cedars, they've come to the town before to ask, and we've just kind of.
So I think Armstrong Penway is coming with some ammunition where, it's, say, just, we want to have you do it because we'd like you to do it versus we want you to do it because according to this, in 1942, the town, they believe that it was changed to a town road in 1942.
Okay. You just said they
They formed a committee.
formed a committee, and we formed a committee to look at an electric Mack truck or the fire that never came to fruition. I just worry that are we rushing this to get this through, or
I don't think we're rushing because it's been on an ongoing discussion for about 3 or 4 months between Armstrong Penway and the town hall. I have not had an appetite to move it forward, and then we have it on. We have this town meeting coming up anyway, so why don't we put this to bed one way or the other?
I'm not opposed to putting it on for the town meeting. I do think we're going to need to be prepared to answer questions from people at the town meeting as far as why not.
Right.
So I just think we're going to need to be prepared.
And I'd be glad to have the residents from that road that that found this information come up and speak, basically is a member of our Board of Finance and one other resident. So have them come up and speak on their behalf on what they found, what research they did, and what the town decided whether we should change it. It's not, again, it's not a major change because we already have 4 other roads in town that we do that same maintenance to, occasional grading, snow plow, and sand. And that's what they're asking for. So the only change is going from dumping material versus grading.
And I'm not opposed to that change. I just worry that we're not looking at it more globally in the town.
Yeah, how many other private roads would fall into the same category?
Well, on that particular meeting, Sean was the first selectman. It was in December 2016. There was 8 roads considered, and that's what the ordinance was passed on those 8 roads.
Armstrong Kentway is one of 8 roads.
One of 8.
So that was considered back then, and what happened with that in 2016?
Town passed that the town passed that these 8 roads would have different levels of maintenance.
So why wasn't the Pentway changed then? Do we know?
I think it'd be at the time, the people involved didn't do the research to find out that that it should be different. The improvement should have been different than what was listed.
We could disagree on whether they decided if it should be different or just research it. But when you talked about the traffic, that the Board of Selectmen is technically the traffic authority, and you went for training and said that they talked about there should be a process for every traffic and road change, and that we follow it consistently so we don't run into a problem where somebody says, hey, you changed our road, or you changed that road but not our road. What steps did you take to change that?
Right, and what makes this road different than the other ones?
Right, so
And that's what I'm saying. I think that this 1942 is what makes it different.
Okay.
And if town may disagree, they might say, no, let's leave it, let them leave it the way it is. But
I would hate for them to say no just because they want their road added. That's why I'm saying, should we look at the next town meeting and have the highway department look at those other roads? And maybe it makes sense now to change some of those roads and do it all at once. But I'll go either way on it. I just don't want to start down a slippery slope that it just.
Well, Sean's the first selectman. He wants to comment, so let's see.
Okay, perfect.
Yes, when I was in office, I prepared and made the ordinance to reflect not what people wanted to change their road to, but what we already were doing for that road. It was to document the level of service that we had on that particular road. And the reason for that, doing so, was for this very reason, to basically make it clear that in order to prevent this kind of thing in the future, there's a process, I believe by state statute, to become a town road. Now, let me first say, it isn't a town road. It wasn't voted on back then, whether it become a town road. And we have not received a dime from the state in town aid road for Armstrong Kentway. So there's a process, just like a developer would have to go through to make it a town road. If we want to do additional maintenance than what is already being done, it should go to a town meeting. It should become a town road. And one of the things that they have to do is bring it up to town road standards.
They're not asking to be a town road, Sean. They're asking to have the same maintenance as some of the other non-town roads that are on this list.
So they want to change the level of maintenance.
That's exactly correct. They don't want to become a town road. They're claiming that they became a town road in 1942. They're saying, with that said, we don't want to be a town road. We don't want paving. We don't want lines. We don't want guardrails. We just want to come up to the same level of maintenance as Patricia Road and as Cranberry Bog and Wrights Road and some of the other roads in town.
What's the benefit to the town? The average town person, it's still a private road. Signs labeled at each end, private road. to discourage the public from using it. And now we're going to expend more public funds, more public hours, of our highway crew to maintain it.
But it sounds like what they're asking, right, is just to have it be up to a particular level that other private roads are already receiving. Is that what I'm hearing?
Only certain private.
Correct.
Not all.
And how is it determined, and you may not know the answer, how is it determined at what level each of these roads? You're saying what we're trying to do is maintain what we had already done and made it
That's what we
official.
had over the time, Nick Mullane had authorized
Or who
the
determined,
highway crew to go out there and do certain levels of maintenance to each road.
who determined that road would only become that level of maintenance versus Cedar Road or some other road?
Over the time, Nick Mullane determined that
So
he would,
he determined that over the time. Now, this Board of Selectmen seated, not Nick. Why can't we determine a change in that?
well, you could, but just.
We could, but
But what you're doing is, you're setting a precedence for any private road. Private developer wants to, put in a private road in the town to do maintenance on it. How are you gonna draw the line as far as where? This ordinance that I made was an attempt to draw the line in the sand. This is what we're gonna do. We're not gonna go back on what we've done over the years. But going forward, I mean, if they want to make it, if they want support from the town, in addition to this, it should become a town road. We should get some town funds from the state through Town Aid Road to maintain. I mean, I think they just want their own private neighborhood and they want the town to pay for it.
I think they're just looking for grading, Sean. I don't think they're looking for us to upgrade the road. So, and again, I guess my question is too, again, when this was made, who determined Armstrong Penway would be treated differently than Avery Lane or Cedars or Billings or any of the?
It was determined on basically, at that time, that ordinance, that's what we were doing annually. And some of those, if you look at the chart in the ordinance, Cedars Drive, so far, I think so far up the road, it had by 1/10 of a mile, we were only doing it to a certain point, and that was recorded on them, so that it was place and time. This is what we've been doing and we'll keep doing. But in my opinion, if we go beyond that, we should consider moving it to become a town road and bring it up to standard.
So we go to town meeting for this ask is what this is. This is ask is just to change the maintenance from one level to another without going to a town road. I don't know why something that was done in 2016 is set in stone and can't be changed. When you're telling me that the process was not really a true process, it was just the first selectman at the time in the town garage decided that these roads would have this level of maintenance. So why can't this group of first selectmen and the town determine the same thing, that we want to change, ask the town if they have the appetite to change this road to this minimal amount of maintenance, but it's an increase to what they have now.
Yeah, you have the ability to recommend to a town meeting
And the
to
town,
do a change in the ordinance.
Yeah, we totally can. I worry about what
Yeah, I just
what
think there should
precedent
be-
well, why don't we
we
worry about
start.
that when it happens?
because once you set that precedent, it's hard to roll back.
Why do you think precedent's different because of what they found in 1942?
You can find studies, you know how many committees we've started in town? Like, there's so many. I mean, we still have the permanent school building committee that's supposed to maintain our schools and we don't use them. So I just wonder, I hate to vote on one. And I don't even know how many private roads we have in North Stonington that could snowball. So if we say we're moving this to a town meeting, but we're not basing it on any standards other than there was a committee formed back in the day, what stops the next person saying, well, you voted yes for that one. Why am I different? And what ultimately does that end up costing the town? And does it change our liability? So even though it's a private road, if we provide the grading and for some reason it's done wrong, is it now our liability if there's an issue, or erosion or an accident, and they say, well, the town graded it. It's a private road, but the town did the work.
So if there was no other road on here that we graded, I would agree with you. But there's half the roads on here are being graded by the town. What's our liability on
I
those
don't know.
roads?
That's why
That would have been a good question for Sean in 2016.
I wasn't sitting up there.
Neither was I.
I'm hesitant with it just because I don't have any hard information on like the true outlook and how much does it cost us to grade it? How many man hours?
So they've come forward, they've asked for this ordinance. I'm fine moving it forward on the town meeting agenda. I would like us to be very prepared to answer any questions. I think it would help me to know if there are 8 private roads in town. These 6 are receiving this particular level of maintenance, and just these 2 don't have anything. We just dump it and run. Then that resonates more with me rather than Armstrong Pentway wanting a certain thing, and how is that different? So I just want it presented that way.
Did you not get this in the packet?
So the packet on my phone.
Oh, sorry.
So I will do that research. I just think we need to be prepared to present that at the town meeting.
Yeah, at the
That
town
all
meeting.
they're asking for is to be brought up to speed with the other 6 or 4, and this is why. I just think we need to be prepared, because if there are other people in the audience that are from some of the other private roads that are not receiving anything, then
And I think that if we have it at a town meeting and the people who brought it forward speak at that, and then people from other roads that want to speak about why their road is or isn't, then it'll get voted for or against at a town meeting, correct? Or we can do this, I can take it off, but then we'd have to call for a town meeting on a different night, because this is the call. So we can, and we don't have to have a town meeting, but the main reason for this town meeting in the state was to try to satisfy the demolition, so we can get that finally closed and paid off. And that's one of the questions.
so tonight we can't amend it to remove number
Yeah,
4.
we
I mean,
can.
to remove number 3.
We can't. So I guess a question based on timing, is this something that the highway department would be doing over the winter?
No, we'll be doing it in the spring.
Then I would make a motion to move this town meeting forward, excluding number 3. Shall the town amend?
It'd be 3 and 4 then. Because four goes with 3.
Move it to,
Okay.
go ahead, make your.
To move it to a town meeting, 1 and 2. On the date, January 22nd, 2024.
And exclude 3 and 4.
And exclude 3 and 4. But I don't want to lose 3 and 4. I'd like to just get a little more information, and then at our next town meeting, have all that information and move it forward then.
The next time
So-
will probably be in May, which is fine, because it's in the spring.
Right. And then we can move in discussion, but
So we
that would
can't-
be-
But you're saying we can't move. We can't move it forward now, it's written, we have to completely retype this, bring it forward at our next meeting.
no, we can amend this as written.
You can.
And move it forward.
Submit it.
I'm not sure about that, but,
Well, why wouldn't we be able? We can amend any.
so when we advertise this, then it would be that we put notation that those were are now omitted from the call.
No, we just,
So it would have to be retyped then.
it would have to be retyped, but we wouldn't have to come back to a meeting because you just typed this up for us to look at and vote
Exactly,
on.
so we could take off 3 and 4.
Right.
move them to
So if
another
we
town meeting.
cross off 3 and 4, and I make a motion to approve your notice of town meeting for January 22nd, 2024 at the North Stony Education Center regarding,
Why don't you read it up to including number 2, that way. it'll
yeah,
be
that's,
on the
well,
record.
that's what I was about to do. January 22nd, 2024, 6:30 PM. Only those attending the meeting in person will be able to vote. The meeting will be available for comment and viewing through Zoom at the link below. Those attending virtually will not be able to vote. Question 1, shall the town approve an additional appropriation of from the remaining ARPA funds balance in the amount of $90,000 to make the final payment and close out the old middle school wing demolition project. Number two, shall the town approve an additional appropriation of funds from the undesignated fund in the amount of $50,000 for the purchase of used 75-foot ladder truck Quint from the town of Colchester, Connecticut.
Okay, so your motion to send that forward.
That was my motion.
Okay. Any other discussion?
So regarding the discussion, I would like to move that forward, but my questions, the other questions would be for those things we just took out, total town roads or private roads, and estimated cost to do this one that we're moving.
So we can move these off this town meeting. What I'll do is I'll have it retyped, have you guys come in and sign it.
Yep.
If you could, and then once it's signed, we can advertise it and I can call for a town meeting. There's the 10th. I think it has to be held within 7 to 14 days, so we still would have time if I get this signed by then.
Yeah, I can stop by.
All right, any other discussion? If none, all those in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay. I will get that done tomorrow, let you know. I don't just check this week or not, but if there's, kill two birds with one stone. Okay, next. Undesignated fund balance, I just gave you a sheet to tell you what I had sent out. You got a copy. The only thing is now we're going through the audit and some numbers may change slightly in the second and third lines. But this was Christine's attempt at the time to let the Board of Finance know where we stood with the undesignated fund. Projected additional revenue and projected unused expenditures. So again, we just got the audit. It's going to be presented to the Board of Finance on the 17th. Those two numbers will change slightly, but we'll have those new numbers in there once we just verify what it says in the audit. But not a lot. I think this is estimated somewhere around 800,000. It might go down to the high sixes or low sevens. But it's not going to make a big dent in the undesignated fund. I just want to let you know that was cleared up. And at the last Board of Finance meeting, they asked us what's left in the undesignated fund and how is it going to be impacted by the 75-foot ladder truck if approved. That's 50,000 coming out, and I'm showing you what the balance is. So the balance could be slightly lower than that. And then they also asked if we get the audit done at the school, how that would impact. That would be $1,160,000 going back into undesignated. And I've calculated if that all happened, we'd be at roughly 16.23%. And their numbers anywhere from 8.5 to 17, so it'll be at the upper level. Now, again, this is just for informational purposes. There was nothing to vote. You want to make any comment on it, that's fine. Okay, next we have tax refund.
So I'll make a motion to approve tax refunds to Toyota Lease Trust, VW Credit Incorporated, Honda Lease Trust, and William Millar II, to the total of $1,900.
Second.
Okay, you can second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the tax refunds as read, say aye.
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 Bob, we skipped number 10.
Oh, sorry. Number 10 is so last year, I'm glad Brian's still here for this. Last year, we put in tried to get a grant to turn some walking paths that are between the Kingswood and Meadowood neighborhood and the school into a all accessible, handicapped accessible hiking area, which we do not have in town. We're a town that has so many trails. We don't have any that are accessible to wheelchairs and so on. So we did not get that grant. And now it's out again, and we're trying to go back and get it. I've had letters of support come in from Greg Howard and Heather Summers. I'm trying to get one from Courtney. We also getting one from the Council of Governments. I think Bill Ricker has also got a letter of support from, I can't sure, I think he reached out to Teresa Pence's and, I'm not sure what else, but what we're trying to do is go back in for a grant a second time. The trails are already there. We're not creating trails. All we're trying to do is, smooth them out, them more accessible. The school does use a portion of it for their cross-country team to run through. So there'd be nothing, there's no trees cut down, there's nothing changing, except for the fact we probably would grade it out, make it smoother, and make it accessible. Will be a couple of culverts that would go in, which are all part of the estimate that we gave for the grant. The grant is 100% grant that we could do the job with. So that's what we're trying to do, and all I'm asking for is we signed this last year as a letter of support the last time. I'm just asking if we can do that again and support it this time.
I'm fine.
We need to make a motion, right?
No, I was just like explanation. So we can make a motion.
Okay, I'll make a motion to move this letter forward, to go for, 100% grant for the, to convert, I don't know if it's Ascot Swamp, I don't know if there's an actual title, Sean, our neighborhood. Is there an actual title for that, those walking trails?
What is it? The swamp?
Ascot Swamp? That's literally the name of it.
That is the
Right?
name.
Is there an actual name for the walking trails? Oh, yeah, no, we understand that, but there are existing walking trails, beautiful existing walking trails. I just was asking you, because it's our neighborhood, if there's a name for it or anything. So, I'll make a motion to move this forward.
Second.
From all of us.
All right.
Do you want us to sign a copy tonight?
I want to have a discussion with them. Sure. Mr. Rothman, do you have a comment on this before we move forward? They don't use the whole thing. They just use a portion of it, Brian. They don't use the whole thing. They go in and come back out on the field, so. But there's about 3/4 of a mile with it.
But this wouldn't affect that.
No, they can still use it.
Right.
No,
Okay.
and so.
Excuse me? Town property.
Have they physically walked it to look at the trails though? Because a lot of the trails flood.
So that's why there'd be some culverts put underneath the trail. So that was part of the cost estimation that we, when we went for the grant. Nothing's really changed on that, except maybe the cost might have changed a slight bit, but we just go for a bigger grant.
And what was the reason it got denied? Do we have a reason it gets denied, or they only allow?
They only had so much money, and for some reason, they didn't consider this at the top of their list. They thought there was more worthy projects.
I didn't know. if-
Sign one of the stuff
But
tonight?
we can, I just want to make sure there's no other comment before we do that. No, okay. Sean? Yes. Yes, when this gets done, there will be a certification. We'll have whoever has to come out to certify it as an accessible trail, which means it can't have inclines and slopes at any more than a certain degree. We'll have that done. I walked the trail. I walked this one many times with conservation and with Don Hill in Allen. We walked a trail, a similar trail in Hope Valley, and they had the same thing. They could not have certain grades because you can't get up or you go too fast down. So it would be certified. I think it would have to be to get the grant for what we're asking for. The thing is too, is one thing we have to worry about, and my concern is, once we do the trail, how do we keep it from being used in the wrong way? Like four-wheelers, mini bikes, that kind of thing. I don't know how we would do that, but that's, I guess, a
There's
question comes with.
actually, I don't know all points of entry, but I know from the Pinecrest Road, there's a gate across, you can't get before we, but I'm sure there's ways to figure it out. I sign it if you want to. Oh,
Right. I
fine.
think, I mean, Sean's point might be that once it becomes handicap accessible, they probably have to get rid of some of those gates.
Well, we have to have
The
access.
wheel-
No,
Right. Big enough, yeah.
Yep.
yeah, I mean, the gates are just, yeah. I
Well,
mean,
part-
they'll have
Yeah,
to
we'll have to that'll be a
trust
nice
that they
problem to
will-
have, because that means we got the grant.
Well, part of the grant process was redesigning entrances.
Okay,
That's already been discussed, so. All right, so all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. So, thanks. Moving on. Old business, vacancies and appointments. The only thing I have is we have a private vacancy on WPCA. So I will start looking for someone that might want to take that. Open Planning Conservation Development. Juliet presented at the last P and Z meeting to, it was basically a workshop to discuss positives and negatives about what the commission felt as far as where we are with the POCD. We did get an extension. And that will not hold up any grants because the extension has been approved by the state. So I think the next thing they'll be doing is going to a public hearing, if I'm not mistaken. Upper funds update, if this $90,000 goes through at the town meeting, I think I gave you last time that the total was in the low 200s would be left in ARPA funds. And demolition, again, at the town meeting, that would be the final payment, that job would be closed out. Other than that, is there any public comment?
Can I just make a comment
Sure.
before we close? It's type of public, and I meant to make it during our selectmen comments. But I think I was caught up with the library and the computer and the sound system, but we lost some great people over the past few weeks that I might miss some, but Joe Gross, Thurlow Coates, and Brad Courier. People that were dedicated to this community. They all were on different boards and different commissions at different times. But I just wanted to pay tribute a little bit to them for the amount of sacrifice that they put into this community to make us a better place. And I wish I did at the beginning of the meeting, but it's been a 2-week cycle of losing some great people in our community.
Thank you for doing it. Well said, and I think, as we know, when we talk about some of the individuals, Joe's role was always during budget season, right? He kept the town on its toes during budget season. Thurlow was very instrumental in forming, and he was the Cemetery Commission for a number of years. And with Brad was the chairman of the WPCA. So all played roles, it's a shame, but we've got that group of people all around that same age group that was very active for years, and they're all, as we all are, but they reached that part of their lives, which, and we're losing them, and it's too bad.
Yeah, Brad was very active on, he was the chair of economic development when I first came on. And he put a lot of time in, but it was at Joe Gross's memorial service. It was amazing how many times they referred to his involvement in the town in the budget cycle and giving every elected official a hard time. They brought that up multiple times, but he truly cared about the community, and he asked tough questions because he supported us and supported this community, but he wanted to make sure his questions were answered, so he can be supportive of the budgets and everything that went through in the schools. So he'll be missed. They all will.
Thank you, Brett. No other public comment? Oh, Sarah.
So Sarah Nelson, Denison Hill Road, North Stonington. First of all, I think this is the first selectman meeting I sat through the whole meeting of. So thank you guys for doing such an amazing job. You have multiple meetings a night, a week. I think it must be exhausting. So I do appreciate the energy. You never act exhausted. Thank you for all the energy and the passion you put into the town. Wasn't gonna say anything about Joe, but you made me think about when I first joined the Board of Finance, and he was very adamant that I read the state Board of Finance handbook, and I did. So I just have one question, and it's about the lights, fixing the lights on the signs. I just wasn't clear on what the next steps were for that. I just was curious. If we know.
Are you talking about the flashing light signs?
Yeah.
So I made some notes at last night's meeting. I'll be honest with you, they're still on my desk right where I left them this morning. Today was quite an interesting day. We had a lot going on. And but I have those notes to look at, and I think we made some recommendations last night of what the next steps were. And I was going to talk to CLA about possible engineering, but the town, highway department, about what it would cost if we kept the same poles. And so there's activities I agreed to do. I just can't remember all of them right this second.
No, that's okay. I just couldn't remember who had the pen. If it was
I
Board of
do-
Ed or Board of.
Yeah, I do remember Steph saying, that I think they were gonna put it on their agenda for tomorrow night.
Oh.
To discuss.
It's not going to get dropped, I promise. Okay,
Take care. Appreciate it.
thank you. Okay. Next meeting is January 16th, which is next Tuesday. We're going to dedicate most of that meeting to the 20-year capital plan. And on that, I'll take a motion for adjournment.
Second.
Okay, adjournment I have at 8:39. Thank you very much.